You're listening to Nightshade Tattoo, Silver Assassin Book 2 by Andrea Pearson. Copyright 2019, Andrea Pearson. Dedicated to Erica L., Virginia G., and Jane C. Chapter 1. Olivia opened the door, and I thanked her again for the tattoo before stepping from her room. The moment her door slammed shut, the hallway flickered out of view, and my breath caught when my surroundings returned. I was in the same hallway, but now it was full of people, all of the bounty hunters and several guards. "Well done," my bounty hunter said. "What do you mean?" I asked. "You've been holding back and fighting," he said. "When I saw you attack that demon the other day, I knew we'd need to set up a different sort of test for you." I narrowed my eyes. "What test?" It was easy enough to convince her to help, and the tattoo was a small price to pay to learn what you're capable of. He motioned to a camera above Olivia's door. "The footage we sent out of you fighting those demons convinced many appealing buyers to participate in an auction. And that auction has just ended." I froze. What was he saying? "You have made me a very wealthy man." He stepped to my side, putting a hand on my shoulder. "Oh, and your new owners are on their way." I stared at him before looking at the others who filled the hallway. Was he serious? Had I really just been bought? The man's gaze didn't waver as he waited for me to do something. To respond. To try to get away. And so I acted. I turned, elbowing and shouldering past the two guards who blocked my way on the left side. I didn't get far, though, before I heard a bang and felt something sharp hit me in the back. Every muscle in my body froze. My back arched. All sound around me disappeared except for a roaring in my ears, and the only thing I could see was a narrow strip of floor that grew nearer as I fell toward it. My dad had told me all about this. I'd been tased. It felt like an eternity before the bounty hunter released the trigger, and I collapsed. Still weak, I was powerless to do anything as several of the guards picked me up and carried me down the hall. I didn't even feel it when the bounty hunter pulled the prongs from my back. Doors lining the hallway opened, and my former competitors peered out at me. I was so weak that I couldn't even look at them. My mind was a complete haze. I wasn't even lucid enough to feel embarrassed. The guards took me to the math wing, and we passed several open doorways revealing nice living quarters. Was this where the bounty hunters lived? I felt like an idiot. No wonder they'd figured out so quickly where I was when I tried to escape a while ago. I'd practically gone through their backyard to do it. They tossed me into a cell in the center of the third or fourth room, and still aching but in better control now, I rolled to a sitting position and took in my surroundings. This specific classroom had been made up to look like a living room. Couches and sofas were situated to invite relaxation in front of a large TV, with end tables and area rugs placed strategically to make the room homier. It was ridiculous. Many guards and bounty hunters sat with their feet propped up, drinking and chatting. "Are you serious?" a bounty hunter with shocking blonde hair said when he saw me. "It worked. Good job, my man." He jumped to his feet and tried to high-five my bounty hunter. My bounty hunter glared at him. Of course it did. I'm not an idiot. The blonde took his scorn in stride. "Just how many buyers did you have bidding on him?" 15, maybe 16. "Teach us, a wise one. How did you let them know there were multiple people bidding on him without ticking them all off?" Once his buyers realized there were others willing to pay more, they increased their offer. They obviously didn't have to. It was always going to be them anyway, but I knew they would. He grabbed a drink from a fridge in the corner, then sat on the couch and ignored me as I glowered at him, vowing to destroy him the minute I got the chance. "It was a genius idea," the blonde said. "Really, I'm impressed." The bounty hunters continued congratulating the jerk, and the shock from the taser continued to wear off. By the time it was fully gone, I lay in the middle of the cell, staring at the mustard-colored ceiling. It didn't take me long to notice that something was off about the paint. The closer to the north wall it got, the darker it became, until it faded into a muddled gray, then deepened into storm clouds. Weird. I'd never noticed that before, and I knew I'd had at least one class in that room. When the clouds shifted, I realized what I was seeing wasn't paint. I slowly rolled to a sitting position, staring intently at the wall. Chills raced across my skin as electricity built around me. Lightning flashed across what was now an open sky, and thunder clapped so loudly I had to cover my ears. The wall opposite me elongated, rolling upward into ancient stairs that met the dark sky. Black and charcoal stone jutted from green grass in the hill around the stairs. Lightning flashed again and again, before congregating into a specific spot above the stairs. That area got darker, and grew in depth and dimension until there was a dark, deep tunnel. I stared at that tunnel, foreboding and more chills crossing me. This was not good. I had no idea where that tunnel led, but I knew I would be entering it soon. Getting to my feet, hands on the bars of the cell, I stared at what was apparently a portal. At first, nothing happened. Not for several minutes. But then I saw movement at the other end. Dark shapes. Not humanoid. Tubular, with what looked like tentacles at the tops and bottoms. The creatures approached gradually, getting larger as they neared. I backed against the cell wall, hating that it wasn't solid, that my back was exposed to the other side of the room. I watched the tunnel, unable to look away from the monstrosity and disgusting horror that approached. What were they? The floor beneath me moved when the huge things stepped from the stairs onto it. Their bodies weren't perfectly spherical. Bumps crossed the large tubes that made up their torsos. I couldn't see a face or head or anything that resembled a human. One of them was larger than the rest, and it turned to the others, saying something in a harsh, guttural language. The other beasts stepped back, and the larger one approached my cell. Every inch of my body screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything but face this nightmarish entity. But there was nothing I could do. Nowhere I could run. I was completely trapped. Panic made my heartbeat double. My breath came in gasps. Control yourself, Abel. I didn't have anywhere to reach for courage, though. Not when these aliens were my future. The beast waved tentacles in the air around me, almost touching me. I held still, not looking away, not turning. I refused to show fear. He, I assumed it was male, spoke to my bounty hunter. The boy hasn't restarted yet. His voice was gravelly and difficult to understand. I was so freaked out, I didn't even take offense at being called a boy. I told you to trigger it, the monster continued. I told you I would pay you more if you did. The bounty hunter shook his head, folding his arms and stepping to my cell, staring at me. No, you will pay me more money in his current state. He can't use his powers to fight you. He can't overpower you or run away. You will be able to train him, rather than him taking control of the situation and killing you. One of the other aliens stepped forward and said something in that guttural language. There was a pause, then the larger alien turned back to my bounty hunter. Very well. Where's the girl? Girl. We will be purchasing her as well. Olivia's bounty hunter stepped forward. He stood straight, proud. Obviously thrilled to be involved in this transaction. I'll get her. I felt a shot of relief. I'm not going alone. The man strode from the room with purpose in his footsteps, and everyone fell silent. I focused for several seconds on the fact that Olivia would be going too, that regardless of how mad I was at her, I'd have a familiar and friendly face nearby. I breathed slowly and carefully, still working on calming myself, watching the way the other humans reacted around the beasts. I was gratified that I wasn't the only one freaked out. Even my bounty hunter, the man who never seemed to feel anything other than scorn and derision, seemed off-put by the otherworldly visitors. No one said anything. Not even the aliens, to each other. They'd gathered near the base of the ancient stone stairs and stood motionless. I couldn't tell what they were looking at since they didn't have eyes, but I suspected the tentacles sprouting from the tops of the tube-like bodies had something to do with their communication or understanding of the world around them. The biggest one had, after all, used them to learn that I hadn't restarted yet. The bounty hunter finally returned with Olivia. She looked small, cowering behind him. Her eyes darted in my direction, and her cheeks flushed before she glanced away. Seeing her obvious guilt, I clenched my fists, glaring at her, wanting to yell, to scream at her. But I calmed quickly when I recognized the expression on her face. She was terrified, humiliated, regretful. And honestly, what she'd done hadn't hurt me in the slightest. I got the tattoo I wanted, something that would help me out for as long as I lived. And the ones who wanted to buy me apparently would have purchased me regardless. There was nothing she could have done to stop it from happening. This realization made the residual anger disappear, at least toward her. My bounty hunter, on the other hand. I shifted my glare to him, barely able to resist the urge to try to break through the cell and destroy him. Every inch of my body filled with hatred, with the need for revenge. He turned and met my expression, and his face paled. Pride swelled inside me as I saw hesitancy and caution reflected in his gaze. Good. Next time I saw him, I would destroy him. And there would be a next time. Now that Olivia had arrived, there didn't seem to be anything stopping my alien master from claiming what was apparently his. I hadn't seen an exchange of money, but of course I didn't know exactly how that would happen. The alien approached again on its root-like appendages, and one of the tentacles from the top of the tubular body snaked toward me between the cell bars. I jumped back, pressing against the bars behind me, but I was powerless to prevent contact, and the tentacle touched me on the arm. My mind went completely blank, turned to jelly. My jaw went slack, and the anger slipped away. I sensed nothing. It was as if I was in gravy, cushioned from the horrors I'd experienced recently. My eyes unfocused and my body loosened, arms dropping to my sides, fists uncurling. My bounty hunter tapped the cell door, and it swung open. Without any resistance from me, even though I knew something was wrong, my feet automatically took me out of the cell. I felt my alien master beckon, and I followed him up the stairs and into the tunnel. Chapter 2. The tunnel went on forever. My eyesight was blurry, my legs were tired, my body was still numb. I couldn't tell if it was from being tased or if it was from whatever the alien had done to me when he touched me. Regardless, I didn't like it. I could sense Olivia near. I don't know how, maybe because she was the only other human in the tunnel, but I could. My bounty hunter hadn't even looked at me again, before turning to high-five the other men as Olivia and I walked into the tunnel. He would regret ever taking me from my home, my family. I wished I could do something. That I could free Olivia so she could use her tattoos to do something. But my mind wandered the moment I tried to regain control of my body. Regardless of how hard I tried, I couldn't concentrate well enough to focus on anything other than walking, than on obeying my new master. And so, the tunnel continued. And continued. And continued. We walked for hours. What surprised me was the fact that my body wasn't tired yet. I appreciated that. But how was it possible? Had the alien somehow removed my need for rest? Or was this a mirage, and we were still in the school? I had no idea. We finally reached the end of the tunnel, and my heart sank at what appeared at the other end. It definitely wasn't the school. Or even Earth. Or anything I'd expected. A garish red light got brighter and brighter the closer to the end we got, until finally, all of the darkness of the tunnel was left behind, and a totally new world greeted us. Everything was a muddy, rusty, reddish-brown color. The moment I stepped from the tunnel, that sluggish feeling left. My brain took command of my body again, and I was able to stretch my arms, pop my fingers, and work the kinks from my neck and shoulders. And then I studied where we'd ended up. The land was desolate. There were a couple of batches here and there of what appeared to be leafless scrub oak. The branches were dead and brown. The ground we walked on was red. The clouds were red and hung low overhead. And it was astronomically hot compared to the air-conditioned interior of the school. A small compound village thing took shape as we continued walking, complete with hut-like buildings made of red clay and thatched roofs. I felt like I'd stepped into some rusty red medieval world. My alien master continued forward, and I knew he wanted me to follow. I glanced over at Olivia. Her eyes were round as she stared at the compound. Her mouth formed a little O, and I realized that even if I tried talking to her, she wouldn't hear me. She was even more surprised than I was at what awaited. We continued toward the compound. The dirt road we now followed led through the compound and up over a hill on the other side. To the left and right were endless fields of dirt. Nothing grew in them, except those occasional thatches of scrub oak. We finally reached our destination, and one of the 4 aliens skittered forward. Then, using a tentacle, pushed open a door in the largest building. The biggest alien, my master, entered it, descending the stairs, and the other aliens motioned for Olivia and me to follow. Rather than making Olivia go first, since I didn't know what to expect, I took the lead, ducking to follow behind the monstrosity who now owned me. I descended the steps into a large, circular room. My master disappeared through an opening on the other side that had been covered by a quilt. I hurried to catch up, feeling as Olivia followed from behind. A long hallway stretched out in front of us. By the slight dampness and coolness in the air, I could tell we were underground. We walked through several rooms, taking more hallways that had been separated from the rooms with quilts hanging in the doorways. So weird. Where did the quilts come from? After about 5 minutes of walking through a maze of halls and rooms, we finally reached a dark, circular room at the end of the compound. There were no windows, and the lighting was artificial. How had they gotten light bulbs to work there? Before I could really think hard on that, I was overwhelmed by a horrible stench that enveloped me once I was no longer moving. Death had visited there. My eyes had adjusted to the darker interior, and I spotted rolls of fabric and what looked like bodies. Human bodies. The alien grabbed my upper arm with one of its tentacles and pulled me closer. "You're in charge now. Get them in shape." He released me and turned and left, the dark brown blanket covering the doorway fluttering behind him before falling into place. And then we were alone. I looked at Olivia. She was obviously still panicking. I grimaced, knowing her visions of future buyers hadn't turned out how she'd expected. Poor girl. I turned and surveyed the room. I really was in charge based on what I saw, and if I didn't start acting like a leader soon, Olivia might have a meltdown. I took her by the arm, forcing her to make eye contact with me. "Are you okay?" She shook her head. "It's going to be fine." I patted her arm, then let go, not sure what else to say. "Let's get this place cleaned up, then go from there." I don't know what overcame me. A sense of resolution. Determination. The recognition that there was no way I would get out of this place without help. I'd seen that tunnel close. I had no idea how it was created. I had no idea where we'd gone, or if we were in the same solar system or even the same galaxy. The only thing I could do was make the best of my situation. To wait, to watch, to learn. And then get us out when the time was right. Grateful for the bright light, I took a look around the room. The smell was so bad, my eyes had started to water, and it didn't take long to find the source of the stench. One of the 4 bodies was dead. I'd thought all of them were, so this was actually good news. I stepped away from the body quickly, not wanting to see more. The skin was deteriorating, the eyes falling back into the head, and the blanket it was wrapped in was soggy. Disgusting. The other 3 were still alive. Fellow slaves, apparently. I felt my heart swell with pity for them. Their bodies were limp, and their eyes dead as I approached. I crouched down next to one of them, studying her face. She was a middle-aged woman with graying hair and big brown eyes. "Are you okay?" She coughed, then cleared her throat, and when she spoke again, her voice was a little stronger. "I haven't seen a young one in a long time." I glanced at the other slaves. They were all staring at me, helpless and hopeless. I motioned to the body. Who was that? The woman shook her head. We don't learn names. Her attention was waning, her eyes going unfocused. Why not? Because we don't have them. We weren't given any. Olivia and I glanced at each other, and I could see the shock I felt in her expression. Well, what would you like me to call you? The woman only shook her head in response. What do we do about the body? I pressed. She shrugged, the lucid look in her eyes completely disappearing. Don't know. We had to get rid of it. I wouldn't be surprised to learn it was the reason these people were so unhealthy. Olivia and I stepped to the body, and I looked it over again. It was a small person, maybe a teenager, though the woman had made the comment that she hadn't seen someone young in a long time. So maybe it had been a small adult. Either way, I could probably carry it. I walked around the room, thinking, trying to decide exactly how to go about the task, and found what looked to be a bathroom in one corner. It was a hole in the ground, with a piece of wood covering it. When I pulled the wood up, a sewage smell whooshed out at me, making my throat spasm and my stomach roil, nearly causing me to lose the last thing I'd eaten. The thought of what I'd last eaten distracted me. What had that been? Why wasn't I hungry? It had been hours. Of course, with all the sensory overload I was experiencing, I shouldn't have been surprised that I wasn't hungry. I returned to Olivia, refusing to think about needing to use that bathroom. What do we do about the body? She whispered. We have to get it out. Or bury it very deep in here. It obviously can't stay where it is. She nodded, her eyes still big. I vote we get it out of here and bury it. The poor person. I chewed on the inside of my lip. She was right. We could bury someone in this room, but I didn't know much about how bodies deteriorated. Would living above a dead person be sanitary for us? Would remnants of it reach the surface and gradually kill us? I didn't want to find out. That meant carrying it somewhere. Could I do that, though? Just up and leave. I crouched next to the lady and tapped her on the shoulder, grateful when she turned clear eyes to me. Am I allowed to leave? None of us leave the compound. I mean this room. Yes. Do what you must. They won't care. Good. I got to my feet and joined Olivia again. Stay here. Make sure nothing happens to them. What do you think might happen? She asked. I could only shake my head in response. I didn't know, and I was too tired to think it through. Without any other response, I turned and pulled the dark brown blanket out of the way and looked down the long hallway. It was empty. I carefully stepped across the threshold to the slave hut, breathing a sigh of relief when nothing happened, then started down the hall. It was a long, long one. But that didn't surprise me. I figured the aliens would do their best to stay as far away from us as possible. At the end was another blanket, this one orange. Pulling it aside, I was greeted with another empty room lined with shelves, cupboard, and drawers. I entered it, exploring every nook and cranny. I wasn't sure what I'd been expecting, but definitely not something so Earth-like. Maybe they'd learned from humans. One of the cupboards opened into what looked like storage. It was full, and I mean full, of blankets. Very handy. I grabbed several of them and tossed them in the middle of the room, then continued exploring. Several more cupboards had more things I could use. Shovels, rakes, buckets, gardening tools. I couldn't help but wonder what they were for. The only plants I'd seen had been that weird scrub oak stuff. Regardless, I definitely would be using the shovels. I grabbed two, picked up the blankets, and went back to the slaves' quarters. Olivia was standing in the middle of the room where I'd left her. Her gaze kept returning to the dead body, and I could tell just how uncomfortable it made her. I handed her a shovel and all the blankets but one. I'll do most of the work, I said. But I'm going to need your help. She nodded, but didn't say anything. I approached the body, grateful that for the most part it was still in the blanket. I mean, I hadn't really expected it to move, but this was an alien planet. Olivia helped me lay the new blanket down, and I grasped the edges of the old one, trying not to look at the body, but also needing to look so I wouldn't end up grabbing it in some way. With a quick heave, I got the corpse on the new blanket, then gathered the edges and picked up the whole thing. I was surprised at how light it was, but judging by the amount of liquid in the dirt where the person had died, I realized that a large portion of it had already seeped into the earth below. What I carried now was mostly skin and bones. Good times. I indicated for Olivia to follow, then left the slave hut and walked down that long hall again. It took us several moments, but we found an exit out of the compound. As the slave woman had promised, no one stopped us. And oddly enough, we didn't even see anyone. I wasn't sure what was going on or why they left us alone, but they must have been very confident in my inability to escape. That thought made me bristle, and I vowed to escape soon. I just needed to learn where I was first, especially in relation to Earth. But even if I couldn't find out that much, surely I could still escape the compound itself. Olivia and I traveled far away, finally coming to a stop next to a little hill. I set the body down, my back and arms aching from the awkward way I'd been carrying it. I hadn't wanted it to leak through and touch me, especially since these were the only clothes I had. Once I had the body situated where it wouldn't roll down the slight incline, Olivia and I started digging. I really hated this type of work. We finished burying the body a couple of hours later and returned to the compound. I insisted on digging a big hole in the middle of the floor and burying the disgusting dirt several feet under. After we completed that task, the smell of death finally started to go away. In fact, it left much faster than I thought it would. But after an inspection of the ceiling, I noticed a small vent next to one of the lights. Apparently, they had air circulation here. Thank goodness. With the death stench now leaving, the sewage in the corner became the next most offensive thing. But I was exhausted. I couldn't tackle that yet. Besides, I was starving and very thirsty. I crouched next to the slave woman. "Is there food and water here?" She moaned. "Yes, but they're bad. All bad. This planet is not good for humans." I could have told her that, but I kept my thoughts to myself. What do I do? Don't know. Don't know. With a sigh, I straightened, glancing at Olivia. "Keep an eye on them. I'm going to go explore." "Will you be okay?" she asked. I shrugged. I didn't know. I can't sit around here. We'll starve to death. Besides, I needed to get my bearings, to figure out where I was and how I fit into everything. This time, when I left the compound, I paid better attention. I did see a couple of aliens, but they ignored me completely. There was no sunlight, at least not direct sunlight, and I couldn't even tell where the sun was. I found several new batches of underbrush that were hidden by hills and mounds of dirt, but nothing that told me where I could find water or food. I went far, at least 5 or 6 miles, and not once did I come across fences. Nothing that would stop me from leaving. I had to admire the confidence of these slave owners. The fact that they believed nobody would try to escape surprised me. Realizing I wasn't going to find what I needed, I finally returned to the compound, joining Olivia again. "How did it go?" she asked. "Not well." Olivia took a deep breath. "One of the slave owners came while you were gone and brought food and drink. I noticed a little table in the corner opposite the bathroom." She lowered her voice, motioning to the woman. "I think she's going to die soon. You didn't find anything at all?" I shook my head. "There's nothing out there. No birds, no livestock, no predators, nothing." I looked over the food that had been brought. It wasn't even recognizable, but what did I expect? We were on a completely different planet, after all. I was even more sure of that now, after having wandered for so long. I wasn't going to find things I recognized. One of the men joined us. "What is this?" I asked, pointing at the food that had been brought for us. He only stared at me, and I wondered if he spoke English, or if he spoke at all. It's not meant for humans, Olivia said. The woman told me. She said we can subsist off it, but only barely. It'll eventually cause us to die from what sounded like horrible diseases. It's obviously lacking nutrients, but I don't know which ones. I nodded, noticing as the effects of not having food or water for a full day came over me. I'd pushed all of it aside while I'd been focused on other things, but I couldn't ignore it any longer. My stomach felt like it was eating itself. That wasn't a sensation I'd ever want to experience again. Olivia motioned to the table and said, "You need to eat. It's not as bad as I expected. Kind of chalky, sort of like a potato mixed with an apple, but without the sweetness of the apple." With a description like that, how can I say no? She gave me a half smile, a relieved expression crossing her face. Had she been stressing for me? Of course she had. I'd been worried for her too. I sat and took a bite. Olivia's description was pretty close. Chalky potato apple. Delicious. And yes, that was sarcasm. The drink was sickly sweet, made from some sort of fruit if I had to guess. It made me gag, but I drank it anyway. I needed the liquids. I took my time eating, but could tell as soon as I finished that the meal didn't satisfy whatever needs my body had. My stomach was full, but I still felt lightheaded. We needed something better than this. No way was I going to be okay with it. Not physically, not mentally. I leaned up against the wall, sitting on the pile of blankets I'd claimed for my own from the storage cupboard, letting my eyes relax as I mulled over the food issue. I'm going to ask the aliens for help. Aliens, Olivia said. Is that what you're calling them? I glanced at her. What else should I call them? She shrugged. Trees with antennae. I chuckled. Nice. Are you sure you should bother them? What's the worst they could do to me? She stared back. Oh, I don't know. Kill you. I leaned against the wall, closing my eyes. They've already taken my life. Olivia didn't respond, and I didn't look at her to see if I could figure out what she was thinking. It really didn't matter if she disagreed about me going to the aliens. We wouldn't survive if we didn't get nutrition soon. Chapter 3. I had it all worked out. If they wanted me to be a good servant, I would need to be taken care of. Early the next morning, after a night in what was, admittedly, a pretty comfortable bed due to all of the blankets I'd collected, I set out to find my master and present my argument to him. I'd insist that he provide me with better stuff than what they'd brought to us twice now. It took me a while to find him. I couldn't tell any of the aliens apart, and I didn't know my way around the compound. Some of them were quite offended when I randomly wandered into their rooms. My alien master wasn't happy when I found him. Of course, I had no way to tell what his emotions were, but I was fairly certain snapping at someone was a thing on this planet too. What do you want? He snapped the moment I entered his room. Food. Water. Edible things that are sufficient and good for a human. The stuff we've been given isn't going to keep me alive for very long. I was about to start into my whole diatribe about physical fitness and energy and mental capacity and all of that, but the alien interrupted me. Fine. Go to the marketplace. Buy whatever you want or need there. And then he laughed. I don't know how I knew it was laugh, but I did. For that matter, I didn't even know how I could hear these aliens talking. It was a physical sound, but there was no mouth that I could see. When I stopped contemplating alien anatomy, I realized my master was still laughing. I wasn't sure what was so funny, but I left him the way he was and returned to the slave hut, crouching in front of the woman. It took me a moment to rouse her. I'm going to get us food. I got permission to go to the marketplace. Do you know where it is? Follow the road that leads through the village. It's a 2-day journey, from what I've heard. You'll never make it. Why not? I got permission. So unless they tried to stop me and rescind that permission, why wouldn't I make it? I opened my mouth to ask, but she passed out against the wall. The poor woman. My body was tired. The lack of proper nutrition was making it hard for me to stay awake longer than a few hours, but I didn't have a choice. If I was to save her and the others who still hadn't spoken to me, I needed to leave immediately. And so I did. I exited the slave hut and headed down the hall toward the nearest door that led outside. Chapter 4. It was even hotter outside. But honestly, I preferred it to being around the aliens or in the slave room. I walked the trail toward the main entrance to the compound. Said entrance was marked with a huge tall gate. I couldn't help but wonder why they'd put up a gate, but no fence. What was the purpose? At least I knew which way to go. As I passed through the gate, half of me expected something to stop me. When nothing did, I breathed a sigh of relief and started down the trail in earnest. Half an hour later, my energy and enthusiasm completely waned, as did my attention span. This world was seriously the most boring place I'd ever been in. I passed several hills that were exactly like the previous. Gentle red mounds that seemed to go for miles. They probably did. The skies began darkening many hours later, signaling the end of the day, and I decided to turn in. At the next opportunity, I left the trail and burrowed in an outcropping of scrub oak, using the brush as a cushion. Luckily, it wasn't hard to fall asleep despite the heat. Voices awakened me, after what felt like only a couple of minutes. I scrambled to a sitting position, trying to ready myself or whomever was out there. I froze. I was back in the slave hut of the compound. What the crap? I blinked a few times, trying to clear my eyes. Was someone playing tricks on me? Olivia sat on the other side of the room, watching me warily. What happened? I asked. You walked back. You were totally unresponsive to everything, and you lay down on the floor and went to sleep immediately. Nothing I did fazed you or woke you up. I stretched my legs and arms, recognizing the tiredness of a body that had overused itself. I definitely felt like I'd walked 2 days' journey, but why would my body do that though? How long did I sleep? 24 hours. My jaw dropped. Are you serious? Yes. The slaves had me working while you were sleeping. Doing what? Digging. Seems like we'll be doing a lot of that here. I got to my feet, checking that the bags I'd packed before leaving the other day still had supplies in them. They did. I needed to get started as soon as possible. I couldn't believe I'd lost so much time. Olivia also stood and handed me a glass of the sickly sweet juice. I gulped it down, grimacing. How is everyone doing? A little worse, but still hanging in there. I nodded. I'll be back as soon as I can. I put my hand on her shoulder as I passed her, noticing how frail and weary she looked. Don't push yourself too hard, Olivia. She gave me a wan smile. I don't have much choice, do I? I'm a slave, after all. Right. I ran a hand through my hair. Okay. I'll see you soon. And I headed for the marketplace again. I really hated walking the same path I'd just barely taken only days before. Such a waste of time and energy. But I pushed onward, wanting to get farther this time before the cloud-covered sun dipped below the horizon. And I did, but not by much. My body simply couldn't handle this planet very well. It took all my willpower to pass the scrub oak where I'd fallen asleep earlier, and stop at the next outcropping instead. I bedded for the night, eager to rest and get a good start early the next morning. Again, when I awakened though, I was back in the compound. I jerked to a sitting position, my frustration quickly chasing away the confusion. But then, I stared at Olivia, realizing something. I think I know what's going on, I said. The aliens did something to us. Our unconscious mind takes over and returns us to where we're supposed to be. It's why they don't have fences. They don't need them because our bodies won't allow us to escape for long. Olivia's eyes widened. Holy cow. I think you're right. But when? When had they done something like that to me? I would have remembered. They haven't even touched me. Olivia shook her head. Yes, they have. When they brought us here. Remember? I frowned. Could that have been enough? It had to be. No wonder the aliens didn't watch over us. If our bodies returned us to them, we'd never escape. Pretty smart, actually. I fingered the tattoo on the inside of my right wrist, thinking. Hadn't Olivia said something about a tattoo that controlled sleep? I glanced at her, and she met my gaze, nodding. The Nightshade Tattoo, she said. It's time for me to give it to you. If I remembered correctly, the Nightshade Tattoo would allow me to go without sleep for a long time. It was exactly what I needed. If I couldn't get to the marketplace on my own, I needed to find a way to do it magically. What are the rules for it again? Every hour without sleep needs an hour of sleep to recover, including natural awake times. So, if you're awake for 3.5 days straight, you have to sleep for 3.5 days straight. I got up and started pacing. Exactly how long can I go? 1 week. You must sleep a full week to recover, though. What happens if I go over a week? She shook her head. It won't let you. You'll be forced to rest until you're at least 1/4 filled. So, nearly 2 full days. I stopped pacing and faced her. What are the ingredients? I'll get them for you. There are only 2. I need something, anything, the color purple and a liquid to mix it in. I tilted my head. That's it. Why is it so easy? Olivia gestured to her arm. I have a tattoo that makes creating other tattoos easier. It's one of the first ones I got. She stared at me, her eyes big as she chewed her lip. I think it's one of the reasons they wanted to buy me. They somehow knew about my tattoos ahead of time. They're going to exploit my ability. Well, I won't let them. I'll keep you safe. You'll be fine, I promise. She smiled at me. I keep forgetting how young you are, Abel. You're still so naive. I bristled for a moment, then pushed my pride aside as I considered what she'd said about my age. How old was she if she thought I was young? I just assumed she was around 20. Olivia continued. And anyway, that's not a promise you can make. She glanced at the other slaves. I'll only give tattoos to you. None of them will help the other slaves, and I don't think they'd work on someone who isn't human. Okay, I'm going to go find something purple. And any kind of liquid will work. Olivia nodded. I'll use the drink they've been giving us. All right. I'll hurry. I left the slave hut, thinking what I might have seen that was purple, and started searching through the cupboards. I didn't get very far, though, before my alien master came and found me. He grabbed me by the arm and said, "It is time for you to work now." Work? I panicked. For some reason, it hadn't occurred to me that I would end up having to do actual slave stuff. They told me to take charge. I took that to mean making sure everyone was healthy. I hadn't even finished doing that yet. I'm not ready. I have to get to the marketplace to buy food and water. You shall do as I request. We have tunnels that need to be dug. He dragged me away from the cupboards and pulled me outside, tossing me ahead of him. I stumbled to maintain my balance, barely keeping myself from falling. Oddly enough, his touch hadn't affected me now the way it had the first time. Probably because he really had put some sort of spell or tag or something on me. I wasn't surprised when another alien showed up, pulling Olivia. We were the only able-bodied humans in the whole compound that I knew of. Who else would do their work? The aliens dragged us to a tunnel before leaving, and Olivia handed me a shovel. And we're just supposed to dig? I asked. She nodded. And dig and dig and dig and dig. They're going to turn it into a hallway, eventually, I think. Connect it to the main compound. Olivia headed down the tunnel, and I followed her to the end, then we both got to work. It was backbreaking. I tried to pace myself at first, not work harder than I needed to, But after several hours, I was really having to push myself. When I mentioned needing to take a break, Olivia gave a quick shake of the head, a panicked expression crossing her face. Trusting her, I didn't push the topic. Maybe they had cameras on us. Or another way to monitor our progress. About an hour later, when I felt like my body was about to crumble into a million pieces, one of the aliens returned. "You may take a short break." The creature tossed a knapsack at us, and Olivia pulled out some of the food and drink. Earlier, the food had looked sort of like bread, but this time it seemed to be a type of root. The taste was the same, though stronger, and I wondered if the bread-like stuff had been made out of this. After I'd finished eating, without even thinking about it, I rested my head against the tunnel wall I'd been digging and shut my eyes. The next thing I knew, someone was whipping me. I jerked to a standing position, protecting my face and head, disoriented to find myself back in the slave hut. Apparently, I'd fallen asleep, and my body had returned me. My alien master stood over me, several of his tentacles flying through the air, striking me. "Stop. Stop." The whipping continued for several more moments, though, and I screamed at the burning pain. He finally delivered his last blow and backed away. "Do not fall asleep again." My entire body shook from pain, from adrenaline, from fear. But mostly from hatred. I'd never been treated that way in my entire life. Not even my parents had ever struck me. I was their good kid. The one who studied and worked hard. Helped out as much as I could. They rarely were angry with me, because I rarely gave them a reason to be. It made me want that tattoo even more. As I followed the alien back to the tunnel, I contemplated using my energy tattoo. But what good would it do? 20 seconds of an adrenaline rush wouldn't get me very far. Not when it came to this sort of labor. The aliens forced us to dig the rest of the day. My hands were blistered, swollen, and bleeding when we finally finished and headed back to the hut. I tried not to let myself slip into despair, recognizing that if I did, I would definitely end up just like the other slaves. Several days passed, with Olivia and me digging. Every day I checked my tattoo, the golden tattoo, hoping it would be ready for me to use. It finally healed, but an opportunity to use it didn't come, and knowing I'd need to rest and eat and drink to recover, I was hesitant to experiment. One morning, our alien masters didn't come to get us. Olivia and I waited for an hour before realizing we must have been given a day off. "You'd better hurry," she said. "Find something purple." I didn't need more encouragement than that. And so I dashed out of the slave hut and returned to the cupboards, searching the blankets and storage there. But it was as if the aliens knew what I was looking for, because I found something of every color except the one I needed. No blankets, no pillows, no objects, no items, nothing. Not sure if I should. I dared to explore around the rest of the compound. As they had when I'd first arrived, the aliens totally ignored me, and I finally found a little trinket in one of the aliens' rooms. It was something carved out of scrub oak wood and painted purple. Rather than waiting around to be found there, I pocketed it in my dirty jeans and left the room. My search had taken most of the day, and I hadn't eaten or drunk anything since breakfast. Combined with my high level of constant fatigue and my poor nutrition, I nearly passed out as I walked toward the slave hut. I wouldn't make it back at that rate, and no way was I letting myself fall asleep and risk having an alien find and abuse me while my body was returning me. The chances of losing the purple trinket were far too high to risk anything. And so, I tried out the golden tattoo for the first time. Remembering Olivia's instructions, I pressed on it, feeling as energy flowed through my veins toward it. I felt a question form in my mind. Did I really want to use it? And I knew it came from the tattoo and not from me. The moment I gave it permission, adrenaline flooded my system, and a huge burst of energy rushed through me. Feeling more awake and alert than I had since I'd been kidnapped, I dashed down the long hallways and through rooms full of aliens, wanting to get as far as possible before the energy rush ended. It took me longer than 20 seconds to reach the hut, though, and halfway there, the effects of the tattoo wore off. I stumbled, barely staying on my feet. Holy crap, I was even more drained now than I had been before using it. I'd need to keep that in mind. I shuffled forward, leaning on the wall for support, my eyes blurry and a ringing noise in my ears. But I made it back. Thank goodness. When Olivia saw me, she freaked out. You used your tattoo, didn't you? I had to. She acted like she hadn't heard me. You don't have enough food and water to recover properly. Why do you think I hadn't brought it up? You absolutely should not use it here. I didn't have a choice. I wouldn't have made it back without collapsing. And there's no way I was going to risk going unconscious and having my body take me here, potentially losing the thing I spent the entire day searching for. She didn't respond for a moment, then said, I know. But still, it freaks me out. Olivia picked up the quill, an inkwell that still had golden ink in it. You do realize you have to wait a week for the Nightshade Tattoo to heal before you can use it, right? I slumped against the wall. I hadn't thought of that. How would we survive another week without proper nutrition? I'll do the best I can, I said. And maybe I'd leave before it fully healed. Olivia disagreed with this idea as soon as I voiced it. You've never used it before. Time is probably different here. For all we know, the tattoos only work according to time on Earth. No, it's not worth the risk. I knew she was right. But man, I really hated how long it would take before we got what we needed. Olivia started getting ready to give me the new tattoo, and she surprised me by dumping all the golden ink out of the well. What did you do that for? I asked. She looked at me, blinking a couple of times before answering. It didn't occur to me to save it. It's not like I can't get more of it. Remember, I have a tattoo that helps me with this. Oh yeah. I'd forgotten. She turned away from me, and I got the feeling she didn't want me to know how she created the ink. I heard her mumbling something, and a little flash of purple light silhouetted before she turned back. The inkwell was now full of a dark liquid that I assumed was purple. Olivia followed the same steps as she did before, except now she didn't have a way to clean my arm. Am I going to get an infection and die from this? Probably, she said, her mind obviously on the task at hand. Great. Okay. Well, I'll see if I can find something in the marketplace that'll help, just in case I do get one. She gave me her full attention, concern etched on her features. You make a very good point. I mean, we don't exactly have good water here. And Abel, you might not make it that far. A week for it to heal, and at least 2 days of travel. Infections can spread very fast. I frowned. I'll just do the best I can. The best we can. I'll take over the bathroom until you're healed. I stared at her. Are you sure? It's not a fun task. I'd been mixing fresh dirt into the hole on a regular basis, then shoveling it all outside into deep holes. I wasn't sure if it was a good idea, but it definitely helped with the smell. She nodded once. Of course. You're the only one who can go to the marketplace. My alien master won't even let me leave the compound. They've only given you free rein. I blinked. It hadn't occurred to me to have her go instead. That actually would have made more sense than waiting for my tattoo to heal. Okay, let's get going, she said. Olivia muttered the words of whatever chant she had to use. Then she started piercing my skin with the quill. It took much longer this time. Probably because she was trying to be careful not to touch anything that might spread bacteria, but also because the lighting wasn't as good here. Finally, she set the quill down and waved a hand over the irritated skin. All right, a week. Again, keep it covered. If anyone sees it, it won't work and we'll have to do it all over again. She snapped the lid of the inkwell in place. I'll hold on to the extra just in case. By that point, it was time to sleep. We said goodnight to each other, then turned in. Chapter 5. The next few days were agonizing. I kept digging tunnels, staying out of the way of the aliens, and trying to help the other slaves, all while so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I was so homesick, my heart felt like it was twisting around itself. I hadn't had much time to think about my family. I'd been really distracted since getting to the alien planet. Now, though, we settled into a monotonous routine of digging tunnels, and I definitely had the opportunity. I missed my mom. I missed my siblings and my niece and my dad. I even missed my friends, though I hadn't made very many and wasn't terribly close to them. I definitely missed my martial arts classes. What had my family told my kung fu master? Had they put pictures of me all over town and held searches for me? If they had, it wouldn't have done any good. I wasn't even on the same planet anymore. The tattoo finally healed, and Olivia helped me test it out for the first time. While you're pressing it, think of the amount of time you want it to keep you awake. It'll let you know if it's okay. How much time should I ask for? It doesn't matter. You can do 30 seconds, and it'll tell you if it's going to work. Okay. 30 seconds it is. I studied the circular dark purple tattoo that had finally become visible to my eyes, then pressed on it. I felt the tattoo sort of awaken, become aware of me and my desires. The question was there. How much time? 30 seconds. It warmed, accepting my request. Suddenly, I felt more alert and awake than I had in weeks. You didn't tell me it would give me energy, I said. Olivia shrugged. Probably because I didn't know it would. I've never noticed anything, but I haven't used mine since getting here. Either way, it doesn't give you energy, it restores you to what you would be normally. I sensed it when the 30 seconds ended. It made me feel sad and discouraged. Sad that I didn't feel like that anymore, and discouraged because it would be a very long time before I would again. How do you feel? She asked. Back to how I did before using it. So, am I okay to head to the marketplace? Yes. Definitely. You should probably hurry. I'll cover for you. Okay, thanks. We decided I would ask for the full 7 days, just in case anything happened. I didn't want to risk running into trouble in the marketplace, or having it take longer than 2 days to get there. And again, like Olivia had said, the tattoos might work differently here than they did on Earth. I didn't want to mess around and find out by accident that I would only have 4 days instead of 7. And so, I pressed on the tattoo and requested 7 full days, shaking my head as I did so. How was I going to make up for it? Maybe the aliens would think I was dead and would leave me alone. No, I couldn't do that to Olivia. They'd pile all my work on her. I had to talk to them. I left the slave compound and found my master in his usual place. I'm going to the marketplace now. I don't know how long I'll be gone. When I get back, I'll need to sleep for several days straight. I glared at the monstrosity that now owned me. And if I don't get that rest, the tattoo will force me to get it, and I'll be useless even longer. You had better not touch me until I'm recovered. He took a moment to respond, his tentacles frozen in the air. Very well. But expect to work longer hours when you recover. What, no argument? No surprise that I'd found a way to get to the marketplace and back. I narrowed my eyes in suspicion. Did they know about the tattoos? Of course they did. That was the reason they'd wanted Olivia. Did that mean they wanted me to get tattoos? Yes, it had to. But why not make it easier? Why not supply Olivia with the things she needed? Why force me to work instead? It didn't make sense. But then something occurred to me as I headed outside the compound. Maybe they were trying to trigger my restart by putting me in stressful situations. Little did they know it wouldn't work. Nothing had been discovered that would force a restart. The walk was long and boring, with nothing to break up the monotony except the setting and rising sun, still hidden by clouds, but I didn't get tired. My muscles didn't get fatigued, and not even my brain requested sleep. It was amazing. I couldn't believe it. It ended up taking me exactly 2 days to reach the marketplace, and that was with me walking overnight. Thank goodness I hadn't taken breaks along the way. I knew as I was drawing close that I'd found what I was looking for. Even so, I was still surprised at how different it felt. The road dipped into a great basin, cutting all the way across and continuing up the other side before vanishing from view. It intersected in the middle with another road that ran left and right. Surrounding that intersection were hectic roads circling outward, all the way to the edge of the basin, full of little shops and booths. I took a breath, calming my racing heart before following the road down into the basin. I still had no idea how I was supposed to pay for anything. The aliens hadn't offered me money, and the woman hadn't suggested I bring some. Head high and shoulders back, acting like I'd done this a million times, I entered the marketplace, following the streets in their dizzying pattern. It took at least 4 hours to get through the whole thing, and right before I was about to give up, I finally found a merchant who sold things for humans. He spotted me immediately and started hawking his wares, so I approached. "What do you have?" "Clothing, socks, shoes, shirts, pants. You name it, I got it." The man appraised me for a moment. "You need more basic survival things though, don't you?" He motioned me to follow him around to the side of his booth, where he had rows of tables and chest freezers with glass tops. All of them were full of food I recognized. Frozen pizzas and burritos and even microwave meals. My mouth watered just looking at them. "How do I pay?" "First time at the marketplace?" he asked. "Yes." "You could have fooled me. You act like you've been here before." That was the idea. Instead of responding, I waited patiently for him to answer my question. "You tell me which residence you come from, and I arrange payment with your master. I assume you're a slave, correct?" "Yes." The man nodded. Most all of us were at one point. I opened my mouth to ask him questions, where he'd come from, how long he'd been here, how he'd freed himself, and where this planet was in relation to Earth, but I shut my mouth. I needed to get in and out as quickly as possible. Lives depended on me. "I don't know my master's name." The man grabbed my arm, yanking me forward and lifting my sleeve. For a moment, I was afraid he was looking for my tattoos, until I realized he was inspecting the spot on my upper arm where my master had first touched me. A series of tiny, faint dots were there that I hadn't noticed before. "You belong to Chattel. He doesn't come here very often, but when he does, he always settles his debts. He's male." The man shrugged. "More or less. I still haven't figured this species out." The crowds were starting to get thicker, and the hair on the back of my neck rose in warning. Maybe I was paranoid, but something told me I needed to hurry. I pointed at what I wanted: meat, fruits, vegetables, water, and a bunch of frozen meals, and the man packed it all up in cooler-type boxes. It wasn't until that point that I realized I didn't have enough arms to carry everything. I asked the man if he had a wagon or something, and he shook his head. "But you may purchase one a couple of streets in." He pointed. "Go that way, and watch for a human man in bright green clothes. He'll help you out. Will you hold my things until I return?" Of course. I made my way in the direction he'd pointed, noticing other humans as they noticed me. The back of my neck prickled again in warning, and I turned. 3 men, who I assumed were slaves, stood at the merchant's place, arguing with him, pointing at the things he was holding for me. The merchant had one hand up, indicating he didn't want to get involved, and was pointing at me with the other hand. The 3 men turned and stared, angry expressions on their faces before starting in my direction. My heart quickened. I didn't know if they'd seen me looking, but I acted like I hadn't noticed them and picked up my pace. I couldn't afford to run into trouble. I hurried down the streets, glancing side to side, looking for the place where the wagons were sold, finally finding it about 30 minutes later. Once I had the man's attention, I pointed at the wagon I wanted and raised my sleeve, allowing him to inspect the spot where Chattel had touched me. I tried not to show my impatience, as he took notes in a ledger before handing over the wagon. All seemed to be in order, and I pulled the wagon away. The handle was rough-hewn, and would probably give me blisters and slivers the whole way back, but it was very sturdy. The wheels were stone, and the bed was made of solid wood. It was heavy but not hard to pull. The thing was smoother than my niece's wagon back home. Knowing the 3 men were probably following me, I headed in the opposite direction of the wagon merchant, instead making my way through several of the circular roads. I ignored other merchants, human and alien alike, who shouted at me, trying to get me to buy their products. Finally, after about an hour, I reached the merchant selling human food and water. He looked relieved to see me, and quickly helped me load the wagon. "Tell me about those men who were trying to buy my products from you earlier." The man glanced at me. "You saw that?" "Yes." "Who were they?" "Trouble. Stay away from them if you can. Not only are they disrespectful of the merchants here, but they don't like competition from other humans. And their owner and yours have been at odds with each other for years." I thanked him before starting down the road that would lead back to my compound. The sooner I got there, the better. Chapter 6. I was only a few hours away when I spotted the 3 men on the trail behind me, rushing to catch up. They probably hadn't expected me to travel night and day without stopping for breaks. Good, they'd be tired by the time they reached me. Rather than using my adrenaline tattoo to run away, knowing that 20 seconds wouldn't give me much of a head start, I slowed down, preferring to deal with them sooner rather than later, then stopped altogether, hiding my wagon in some scrub oak. That wagon and its contents were worth their weight in gold. No way was I risking losing them. And then I sat on the edge of the road and waited. About an hour later, they caught up to me. They were only slightly out of breath, indicating they were in good shape. I really hoped my years of martial arts would be enough. Who knew how much training they'd received? When they were about 20 paces away, I got to my feet and stood in the middle of the road, arms at my sides and gaze direct. Forthrightness tends to disarm people, making them second-guess themselves, but these men must have had a lot of experience because they didn't even bat an eye. They circled me, taunting me in a language I'd never heard before. I tensed, ready for anything, staring straight ahead, relying on my peripheral vision to see the attacks when they came. And I knew they would. One of the men pushed my shoulder, trying to get a reaction out of me. I grabbed him, jerking his arm behind his back, probably dislocating his shoulder if his screams said anything. I punched the back of his head, aiming my fist just right for the desired outcome. He slumped in my arms, and I shoved him into the thicket near my wagon. He didn't get up, unconscious for now. The other 2 watched all of this, probably stunned by my fast reaction. They hadn't expected a fight. Their hesitation didn't act long, and I didn't have time to prepare myself before they attacked at the same time. I was dismayed to find that they'd been trained, but not in any of the fight forms I'd learned on Earth. They were fast, agile, and experienced. I was grateful I'd taken out the first guy right away. I wouldn't have been able to fight all 3 at once. As it was, I wasn't sure I'd win against these 2. I parried with them, doing my best to keep them in front of me, but it was nearly impossible, and they got in several punches and kicks before I remembered my tattoo. I pressed it, feeling as adrenaline flooded my system. My actions became more sure, more steady. Any sluggishness from fighting washed away as the burst of energy raced over me. Even with the adrenaline, though, I still barely kept up with them. I fought with everything I had, pulling from all of my training and instincts. My 20 seconds were running out. I had to do something. I grabbed the nearest man, jerking his arm and pulling him toward me. With a quick motion, I spun him around before grabbing his chin with one hand and the back of his neck with the other. And then I twisted as hard as I could, in a fast, jerking motion. Several weeks earlier, I'd attempted to break the neck of a demon. I hadn't succeeded, but I'd done enough damage to keep him down. This time there was a sickening snap, and the man's legs buckled under him, causing us both to fall to the ground. I scrambled to get out from under him, barely doing so before the last man screamed, falling on me with hits and punches and kicks and even bites and scratches. The last of the adrenaline wore off. My body wilted, I couldn't keep up with the man's rage. I felt as his blows met their target, raining down on me. It was all I could do to stay conscious as he attacked. I was so tired, so exhausted. Was he going to kill me? No. I couldn't allow that to happen. Olivia depended on me. The woman depended on me. I didn't want to die here, on this forsaken planet, without seeing my family again. With a roar and a burst of energy that I pulled from the last of whatever had been keeping me going, I grabbed the man's arms, blood pouring from my nose and bruises forming all over my body. I whipped him to the side, punching his head into the ground once, twice, 3 times until he lost consciousness. Then I stumbled to my feet and grabbed my wagon, jerking it from the underbrush. The first man was stirring in the bushes, coming to. He'd have a huge headache, but I knew that wouldn't keep him from trying to kill me. And I wouldn't survive another attack, I was sure of it. So I ran. I couldn't go more than 5 or 6 paces, though. My eyes wouldn't focus, my ears were ringing, and my entire body ached. I lurched forward, pulling the wagon behind me, barely able to feel it in my hand. The man cursed, and I glanced back. He'd dragged himself from the bushes and was inspecting the other 2 men. He looked up at me, meeting my eyes with more vitriol than I'd seen in a long time. Yeah, he definitely planned on killing me. I braced myself, but he didn't come. Instead, he turned his attention to his fallen comrades, and I turned mine to the road that led back to the compound, refusing to look behind me. If he attacked, he attacked. I wouldn't be able to do anything about it either way. I don't know how long it took me to get back. I entered a sort of dazed-like trance, neither fully awake nor asleep, barely coherent enough to continue. I must not have reached the 7 days. Otherwise I would have collapsed in the middle of the empty road and slept. My vision tunneled as I passed through the huge gate, walked by the main hut, and reached the door nearest the slave quarters. Getting the wagon down the stairs and into the hallway was a challenge, but I managed it on my own. Then I pulled it to the slave hut, where I collapsed on the floor. Olivia rushed to my side, touching my cheek gently. Oh my word! What happened? I ran into some men who didn't like me. Do you need anything? I shook my head. Get everyone their food and water. Okay. She quickly dispersed the supplies, pouring water in the woman's mouth while I lay spread eagle on the ground, staring up at the adobe-type ceiling and a light that was flickering. Do I need to sleep the whole week? I asked. No. You'll get more sluggish the longer it takes you to fully replenish, though. Good. Because I think we're going to have some trouble. Oh. She cleared her throat. We might already be having trouble. I looked to see what she was staring at and scrambled to my feet, backing away. Several of the aliens were coming through the doorway. The largest one, my personal master, raced across the hard-packed floor faster than I thought possible, root-like appendages barely visible with how quick he moved. He grabbed my arm with his tentacles and jerked me toward him. You attacked slaves. You killed one? No. I mean, yes, I killed one, but they attacked me first. I barely got away. Their master is not happy. They are coming to exact revenge. And you will defend us. This has been Nightshade Tattoo, Silver Assassin Book 2 by Andrea Pearson. Would you like to gain access to exclusive audiobooks, only available to members of Andrea's Readers Group? Click the link in the description to learn more.